Welcome to Cosmic Divide. I actually don't even know what episode this is. Didn't check, but I don't need to check. You know why? Because I'm with a god of the show. He's back in WWE style. He was gone for a little while, and now he's back. He's like The Rock. It is Mr. Elevated Speaks, coming to you live from an undisclosed location, wherever the GE, a team scrims and sorts out their stuff. You can see they got a nice brick wall there behind them. Yeah, and you might hear, by the way, some screams of the global esports players as they scrim. You can kind of see them there in the background playing. So yeah, if you hear anything, if you hear any swearing in some languages, then you'll know why it was not elevated, and I'm sorry. But Mr. Elevated Speaks, welcome back to the podcast. How are you doing? How is Korea? How is working with global esports?
Hello, first of all. It's good to be back. And yeah, I'll try and mute my mic if the guys get too loud. It's not scrims, it's ranked, which is why it's extra.
Oh, it's only
noisy in
ranked
here because we don't scrim on weekends at the moment. We have long scrim days during the week, and then the weekends are for them to do whatever. But yeah, it's good. Seoul is nice. I'm not really a city person, but as far as cities go, I've been enjoying living in Seoul for a little bit. And yeah, I mean, as far as the global esports experience it's been pretty like just a grind. I mean, I got here, we were scrimming for like a month and a half, 2 months before I even moved here. So I was on Korean time working from the US, and then just continued scrimming, and then we played kickoff. Obviously, that didn't go particularly well. So we took like a 4-day break and have been scrimming ever since. And yeah, we just scrim for many hours a day and then do a bunch of VOD review and strat work. And it's basically, like noon to midnight every day. So lots of work. But it's enjoyable. I mean, the only thing that is not great is that I just like miss my family and comfort of home because I'm just kind of like alone in Korea, not able to speak the language. But it is what it is. So
Yeah, that sounds that probably would be, I think, the main problem with anyone going to
yeah,
a foreign land, not knowing the language. That sounds a bit rough. But take me through what you thought. Let's just start with global esports first. That's what we're going to talk about first. Which hopefully
okay,
you are, an expert on global esports 2025.
we'll see.
Take me through the global esports. What you thought of kickoff? Maybe what it's like, because a lot of people also complain about the formats and stuff. Like, what is it like being inside a team in like, like do you not like that? Oh, we won a game and then we lose two in a row and we're out straight away. Even if you lose the first game, you're in the same position as if you lose the second game. You go to that lowers straight away. Like, what's it like being inside a team? Just preparing for kickoff. What you thought of it as an experience.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as the format goes, I mean, it's like I can kind of understand the whole like needing to seed the teams that went to champs forward so that the format, like the first round, kind of works better than just putting everybody into a bracket. Maybe, I guess, but yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel good to to like win a game and then lose a game and end up in the same place as a team that just lost a game. I think there's so much like turnover right now in terms of teams. Like most of the teams are not even remotely close to the same rosters as the ones that were at champs. There's a few that are, and those ones I think probably deserve the higher seeding. But there's a lot of teams that don't have like almost any of the same players, and they get seeded forward, and then that feels a little bit weird. But then I don't know. I mean, like we lost two, so we went out. It is what it is. every team is going to lose to and go out. So it's not really that big of a deal to me. And we had to beat every team to win anyway. So at the end of the day, it's just like it kind of sucks to play an extra game just because of last year's bad results for a team that I was not a part of. But you know, at the same time, it's just like an extra day of practice essentially for the regular season. So
See, now what I'm wondering is, obviously, a lot of the fans kind of want, like, there's a lot of community outpouring for, like, oh, I wish we had more games, right? So would you prefer, maybe instead of just like a straight double limb bracket, maybe you start in like, little groups and things like that, and maybe you play, like 3 games in a round robin, and then it goes to kind of a playoff stage, just to kind of like up the minimum games. Do you think like that would be better for players? Would that, would you prefer that as like a coach of a team?
Yeah, I think 100%. I mean, because it's like the kickoff, right? You're supposed to showcase the new rosters. You're supposed to sort of like get yourself ready for the rest of the season. And I think probably the bigger thing is that it qualifies for like a Masters event, which has huge implications as far as champions go. So I think it's a little bit maybe short-sighted to just have like a double elim direct bracket, especially with the seeding from last year with all like the roster moves and stuff like that. It's a little bit messed up that it like seriously impacts your potential placing for the year. And so I think it would be good if teams got a little bit more time in terms of just like playing on stage, because yeah, as you kind of alluded to right now, it's like we scrimmed for like 3.5 months. We played 3 games, and now we're just like scrimming for another 2 months basically until we play again, which is not super ideal. But it's just kind of like how the format is. But I definitely think that kickoff, just because like if it was just like its own sort of standalone event, and then there was season 1 goes to the first Masters, season 2 goes to the second Masters, and then there's like, I don't know, an LCQ into champions, I think that would make more sense as far as like the overall structure of the season. Or if you want kickoff to qualify for Masters, then it definitely should be a little bit more complex than just a bracket, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. And talk me through global esports. Talk me through your, first win as a coach. Talk me through your first losses as a coach. What was it like, being there, in the little coaching booth? What was it exciting? Were you like, oh my God, I'm here?
Yeah, actually, I wasn't really sure how it was going to feel like going on stage for the first time. I thought it might be kind of like fun and remind me of like competing, playing sports as a kid. And that's kind of exactly what it turned out to be, where you get like the little bit of butterflies, but then it turns into excitement right before you actually walk out on stage. So there's like a little bit of nerves, but then it just turns into like, yes, like let's go compete. Super fun. The coaching booth, the whole setup is interesting. The white noise is like insanely loud. It just sounds like you're in a wind tunnel the whole time. And you can hear it like through the in-ears. So you have like in-ear headphones, and then the outer headphones with the microphone is just like blowing crazy white noise into your ears the whole time. So you actually can't hear like anything other than the in-game audio, especially because you turned up, but you can feel stuff. So like there was one round where DFM was Odining our deadlock wall on split, and like the entire stadium was rumbling. So you could just like feel the whole thing shaking, which is pretty cool. But then yeah, as far as like the first win, obviously we had to, as many teams do, have to deal with some like visa issues going into the event. Ours were particularly annoying because they like stretched for a long period of time. The guys had to do a lot of like extra interviews and stuff like that. So we actually ended up not having 5 players in the same location until like 3 days before the event, which was not great, because like a huge amount of the actual team bonding and sort of like team culture and that type of stuff happens when you're actually there together and you can just, take off your headset and like go outside and like walk to the convenience store or like have a meal together or something like that. So a huge amount of our like prep and stuff was just Discord. We'd have like three
Yeah.
players here, two players here, and then the coaches, and then other guys would be in Singapore or the Philippines, and then finally we got everybody here. Well, we got everybody here that ended up playing at kickoff. Obviously, our initial fifth player is still not in Korea, but Darion did a really good job filling in for us as well, and so it was easy to get him here just because the Singaporean passport is pretty strong. And then, yeah, as far as the first loss, definitely disappointing losing to Talon. I was pretty confident going into it, and I think that we should have beaten them. The second loss was definitely the one that was super rough, because we just played like shit, to be perfectly honest. We played really bad, and everybody knew that we were playing bad, and it just kind of like, it was just one of those things where like you can tell you're playing bad, everybody knows you're playing bad, like you're trying to fix things, but it just is not happening fast enough. And I think maybe the worst part was just not really getting to show like a lot of the stuff that we had prepped, right? Because we ended up just playing fucking Split and Abyss over and over and over. And so we didn't actually get to do a lot of the cool stuff that we really wanted to showcase.
Yeah, that's a shame. And also, like, when you initially see the draw, you're like, okay, Global playing DFM. Oh, but then the winner plays Paper Rex. Oh, so that's, that's an unlucky draw. Like, so whoever wins this game probably doesn't matter too much. And then it turns out that Paper Rex just are just like a crying baby. Just like, like you're thinking, oh, this is going to be a tough game. And then DFM roll them because Paper Rex are just, don't know what they're doing. And so I assume it must have been even more annoying after that. But I do just want to quickly talk about as well. You don't have to reveal too much here, but I do just want to ask.
Sure.
You're playing a lot of Double Sentinel. Now, Double Sentinel is not really something that I think has ever really existed outside of maybe on Icebox. In terms of like a strong meta presence. It's not just you playing it, right? There are other teams that are also playing, Double Sentinel on a couple maps and whatever. But is that a direction that you think is a smart one? Do you think that that's like an idea that can go places on quite a few maps, or was this more of a like a kind of thing we're throwing out for kickoff? You don't have to reveal anything, of course, Elevate, if you don't want to.
Sure. I mean, I think the main thing is just that it's sort of like a byproduct of the Neon meta, like the Neon Breach meta when Neon was super busted. It was sort of like, okay, well, how do we slow down this stupid agent? And a lot of teams have gone to like the Vice Deadlock type stuff as a solution to that. And honestly, like now with Teo in the game, you kind of have to play these like hybrid sentinels to some extent.
Yeah.
Because like, I mean, Killjoy is just a bad agent. Like just straight up, she's not good. Because there's just so much stuff that counters her at this point.
I've been doing the stats. So it's not looking good for Killjoy on the stats.
Yeah. And so when you have like these hybrid agents that kind of do multiple jobs, right?
Yeah.
Then you can get away with playing multiple because like, I mean, Deadlock is kind of an initiator and a sentinel, and same with Vice. And so you get to mix and match a little bit, and maybe you still need a little bit of traditional sentinel, and so you can like throw in a Cypher or something like that into the mix, and you get some interesting comps because of that.
Yeah, I think this is unarguably the best meta that Valorant has had in terms of like the things that you can play. I mean, and again, like having done like the stats and looking at some of the early win rates as well, like you'd be surprised. Like honestly, like, and there is always surprises, but like I'm sure when I reveal them that like people will be surprised at just how like, like I'm looking at Neon's win rate on some of these maps, and it's actually like, oh, this is actually like Neon still looks viable. It looks like, because it's not even just like Nongshim winning. Like any team that has played Neon on this map, oh, it's actually doing all right. Like there's more stuff than I think even people might realize. But I do want to look ahead just quickly as we stick on global esports to your group stage. So I've got your group up here. You unfortunately, I think, got the rough group. I think you got definitely the harder of the two groups, for sure. In your group with Global Esports, there is Boom Esports, easy. Paper X, easy. DFM, Revenge Game.
Yeah.
Gen G, Look Lost. And DRX. Okay, they're pretty good.
Yeah.
Talk me through the group. Are you like, not feeling great about it? How are you feeling?
Honestly, I don't really care. I feel like Pacific is very flat this year in
Yeah.
terms of the peaks and troughs of the teams. Like most of the floor of Pacific has come up, and most of the ceiling of Pacific has come down. And so, and it's not necessarily to say that like the good teams in Pacific are worse than the good teams in other regions, but it just feels like very flat. Like
Yeah.
um, I legitimately believe that if we'd beaten DFM, we probably would have beaten Paper X.
Yeah.
And then, if we're beating teams that are like household names, then and RRQ is pushing, a lot of these teams to the limit, and DFM is beating these teams, and Talon is making top, or like anybody can win these games. It seems like, and Boom is giving T1 a run for their money constantly. It's just part of me is like, I kind of wish there was like a few free wins on the schedule because it would make it easier to make it to Masters.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it's good for the game that every game is going to be interesting.
Yeah, I think Pacific should be very, very interesting in terms of, because the other regions I think do have a couple clear outliers of like, oh, these teams aren't very good,
Yeah,
and a couple teams who are like, oh, these teams are very good. But yeah, I think like Boom T1 is the ultimate example, right? You've got the team that
yeah,
didn't even actually qualify for Ascension,
right.
came second.
Like
No
like
one's expecting,
actually a tier
yeah,
two team.
yeah, like no one's expecting anything from them. Versus
Yeah,
T1, who were, maybe preseason favorites based on some of the moves that they made. And Boom won the second map, and they lost the first map 13-11. Like they
yeah.
could have won that game. Which would have been a major upset had they done it. So yeah, I think Pacific is probably going to throw up some interesting results. Let's just put it that way. But I do still think you'd rather be in the other group because I think, could Gen G turn into a monster? Yes. Could DRX? Maybe. But yeah, let's quit talking about global esports for 1 second, because there are other things going on in the world, and Masters Bangkok is coming up, as you might know. And for Masters Bangkok, it's become a bit of a tradition to do a top 10 list. Now, in my
Yeah.
case, I did a top 15 list. And I'm sure, you're a very busy man now, so you haven't had time to do your own. But I thought I would, give license for you to take a look at my list and see what you think. Now, of course, this is just people at Masters Bangkok. So
Right.
if you see a name on there that you're like, oh, why are they in there? That's why.
Yeah.
What do you think? I've got Kang 1, Leaf 2, Durka 3, Trent 4, Kiko 5, Freeing 6, Zekken 7, 8 Safe, 9 is Chichu, 10 is Mako, 11 Less, 12 Kai, 13 Smoggy, 14 Hyunmin, and 15 Buzz. Thoughts?
Not enough Sentinels players. Definitely not enough America's representation in general. USA. No, honestly, I don't really hate any of the top. Honestly, the top 10 is fairly solid to me. I don't know if I would put Kong Kong number 1,
Who would you put
but
number 1 then? Let's start there. Who would you put number 1?
just based off of their performance in kickoff, I would maybe put Leaf number 1.
And I
Um,
think that's reasonable. I really
Leaf,
go on, you go.
Leaf, Durka, or ooh, I think there's like some outlier performances like Kiko and Freeing
Mm,
that make you want to put them super high, but it's
yeah.
hard to do that when it's their first
Yes.
international LAN.
Yes.
So I understand kind of like where you're coming from. You put like experience plus good performances over just
Yeah.
straight good performances. Which
Exactly.
makes sense.
And that's the thing. And I put Kiko and Freeing that high because when you go through their actual kickoff runs, they are dominant in like every game, pretty much. They might
Yeah.
have like one bad game or one bad map, but for the most part, they are the highest rated player. They have the most kills, and then neither of them are duelists on their teams either, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
like their performance is insane how good it is. And so yeah, I had to put them pretty high. But you're right, I did go for like, oh well, Leaf and Durka also had very good performances, and I know that they are incredible players. Putting Kang 1, to me it was, I don't know. I honestly, it just kind of felt like it was a rare occasion where I didn't really know who to put number 1. I didn't really know because
Yeah.
whilst Leaf had carried hard, his grand final maybe wasn't as good. And I was just like, well, it is Kang, and I definitely know that Kang is very good. They just won champs. And I just had this feeling of like, I didn't want to underrate EDG because I felt like a lot of people might, because EDG haven't played in a while. I thought people might like underrate EDG, and we're gonna get to Masters Bangkok and go like, oh yeah, they won champs. Oh yeah, and they went through the uppers and they won, and they were the best team. Yeah, they are the best team in the world. And I know that they started their kickoff a bit sleepy, but then they won 32 rounds in a row.
Yeah,
like,
I mean
that's insane.
I have a very skewed view of this team just from scrims, and I don't want to like.
Oh.
I don't want to put them on blast too much, but it's just let's just put it's an experience playing them in scrims. So I'll just put it that way.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is.
I think there's a couple of omissions, I will
Go
say,
on.
and I think you've got the wrong player from Trace is the first thing. I think
okay.
Feng
You think Feng
is by far the best player on this team.
You think?
Yes. Yeah. I
See,
think he's by far the best player on this team. He has definitely the most impact. Kai is good.
You want to know what happened though? You want to know what happened? I said on stream that Feng was Trace's best player. Then I got a bunch of comments saying, no, it's Kai, it's Kai. Nah. I went back, watched the grand final, and Kai was Kai was doing, some decent work in the grand final in moments for Trace. And like I couldn't remember the other games as well. So I had just had the grand final experience and a bunch of people just telling me Kai's the better. But my initial thought was the Feng was the better player. So maybe I should have just trusted my instinct instead of getting, many guide essentially by people in my Twitch chat.
He's definitely the difference maker on this team. Like if he has a good series, Trace can beat anybody at this tournament. If he's kind of quiet, then they have no chance, basically, is the way that I look at this team. Also, I think Meteor has to be on there instead of Buzz, probably. I just think he's more impactful on T1.
See, I agree with you, but he had, like, stats-wise, he had a horrendous kickoff. Like, I didn't think it was like, you go look at his numbers, they are bad. He had, like, a good map or two, but I didn't realize how bad it was. Because I was going to put Meteor instead of Buzz. And I only threw Buzz on there, by the way, as like, oh, I've got to throw T1 a bone. That was
he's the only player, which is crazy.
Yeah, that was like a last second, like, oh, I'll give him 1 at 50.
Yeah, but honestly, I would even kick Meteor and Buzz off to put Kicks on there. I think Kicks had like an unbelievable.
That's perfectly fair. Yeah, I mean, I did have Kicks like in my kind of short list to put on in this kind of spot. But yeah, I just literally ended up throwing T1 a bone. That's the only reason Buzz is really there. Otherwise, probably someone else would have got that spot. But when I was looking at it, for me, it was like the top, because I really struggled with like 7, 8, 9, 10. The top 6, I was like, these, like, based off just their performance in kickoff and who they are, for the top 4, I was like, these kind of have to be in your top 10, these top 6. Zekken obviously is very good and probably does deserve to be in the top 10 because obviously he's insane, but didn't have maybe the best kickoff, but he's Zekken. Safe as well. I was honestly surprised with Safe and Mako, just because obviously they're IGLing now, so you think like, oh, it might slow down some of their performance. I was actually surprised at how good Safe's numbers still were. I know he's still playing a bit of ISO.
Himself on ISO, which helps for sure.
But his numbers are still good, and like it is Safe. Like if you're being real, he is a very good player. We know he is a very good player. So, And that's the kind of the reason why, like, Les didn't have maybe the best kickoff throughout, but also he is Les and he had a good like grand final. And yeah, so that's the list I've ended up with. I think it's okay. It's not the best I've felt about a top 10 list because there wasn't normally there is a clear one, right? Normally there is
Yeah.
like a clear, like, this is obviously the number one player. And I think normally it's a little easier as well. Normally you can get to like, I think 8 or 9 before you start going. Whereas this time I think I got to like 7 and I was like. So it wasn't as
Yeah.
easy as maybe some others.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to agree. I think probably the top 4 is like super good. They could honestly be in any order. Trent is in rare form at the moment from what
Yeah.
I've seen
Yes.
as far as his aim. And then Dirk is like on a mission to make people remember why he was probably
Yeah.
the best duelist in the world, like before Ospas and competing with Ospas.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's going to be really interesting. I could see there being like a little bit of a gap between some of the teams at this tournament. I don't necessarily I don't necessarily know if we sent our best, overall as regions, but
Okay, let's start there then. Actually, let's start there. Which teams do you think?
Oh, you're gonna make me say it, aren't
Maybe
you?
they aren't the best. I mean, it sounds like you're referring at least to Pacific. So which of these
Um,
teams is not sending?
no,
Who's not sending their best?
I mean Pacific. I honestly think like DRX were the clear number 1.
Yeah.
And then after that, I think probably T1, Genji, and maybe Nongshim all could have made it.
Yeah.
Just like depending on the day.
Yeah.
And then after that, I mean, for EMEA, I just feel like
You're not a Gluquid fan? Oh, this is the perfect time. I mean,
I think they had a pretty easy road, to be honest.
Bringing you in here, this is the perfect time. You have been the biggest Team Liquid hater for as long as we were doing the show. It was always the hatred on Team Liquid, and you were completely justified in your take that they were, a clown org who didn't know what they were doing.
No, it's not that they're a clown org. I like the org. They were a good org, but the way that they built their Valorant teams has made me question.
But now here they are, getting to a Masters tournament where there's only 2 seeds. I mean, that is impressive. And I know you said that they had an easy run, but like, who else from EMEA is deserving of going? I don't know how much EMEA you watched, but let me tell you, there is no option.
Heretics played like garbage.
Oh my god, Heretics were
played
awful.
Really bad.
Yeah, so you can't argue for Heretics. And Liquid beat Foot as well, so if you want to say Foot, like, well, Liquid beat them as well, so it's like,
yeah, you
run out of options. And Fnatic weren't that good either.
I don't entirely know how they beat Foot, to be honest, but they did.
They managed to drag Foot down. What they became the masters of early on is they just became the masters of dragging teams down into the glue, and they were bitten by a radioactive glue stick, and so they know how to get out of the glue. And so Foot were left trapped in the glue, and they were sailing sky high. But yeah, obviously the majority of this episode from now on, we're going to be talking about Masters Bangkok because it's the Masters, and it's coming up, so it's going to be exciting. And I think probably the easiest way of doing it is just by going through the games. Old style Cosmic Divide. Let's just go through the games, talk about the teams. I mean, we've already briefly touched on the first game that's going to be happening here. If you want to take a look at the schedule, because it's EDG versus Team Liquid. So let's start with EDG then. You kind of, hinted that, maybe... I mean, I could imagine the EDG and scrims. I mean, I don't know if you saw Nobody Abyss against Trace, where he's just walking off on his own and getting a 3K every single round and dropping 45 kills or whatever in a map and literally solo winning them a map. I imagine it's very chaotic and messy, and they win a lot of fights sometimes, and if they don't win those fights, you end up thinking, what is this team doing? I assume that's what their scrims are like.
there is a lot of like I'm not entirely sure what's going on. Like, yeah, I mean they really are a team, and here's one thing that's kind of interesting is that um I don't know if you've looked at like the Oracle's Elixir stats website before. Um, but one of the stats on there is like trade percentage. And if
Mm,
you look at last year's champions, I think like the top three teams, or out of the top four teams that placed, three of them were in the top trade percentage, and it was like Lev and
Heretics,
Heretics
Sen, I
and
think.
Sentinels, and then EDG were like in the middle of the pack. And that's just who they are. Is they are just a team of heroes, basically.
Yes.
And sometimes they're the Avengers, and every single one of them is instantly one-shotting you every single time you see them. And sometimes they're a bunch of drunk toddlers running around on the map. And
Yes, that's a great way of putting it.
honestly, it's like completely random which one of those shows up, like
Yes.
depending on the day. Like, and I don't want to talk too much about scrims because I'm not really entirely sure like what proper etiquette is, but like we've scrimmed them quite a bit, and we'll play them even sometimes twice in a day. And the first scrim, it's like it's almost like playing a tier 3 team. And then the second scrim, Kong is dropping like 40 kills and it's impossible to kill him. And
Mm.
it's like, what happened between in the last 2 hours between when we played them and now we're playing them again? And I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. That I think yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I think it even leans into their IGL, right? That's nobody as well. Right?
Yeah,
Sometimes he's walking around, it's like, what are you doing? Like actually, like what you play this game all the time. Like how have you thought that that is the correct reaction to whatever is going on? Like how have you
yeah,
thought that? And then sometimes they'll do something that's like, you are a god. You
yeah,
how have you done this? How have you figured that out? It's like and even their run in kickoff as well very much symbolized that also, right?
yeah,
Like the first time they played Trace, they got absolutely rolled. It looked like Trace were playing a tier 2 team. Like
yeah,
Trace, are kind of more like, let's say, more solid. They're kind of, they are who they are. They have solid players across the board. They're just a good team, right? And they played like a good team the first time they played EDG. And EDG, like you said, looked like a bunch of toddlers wandering around, don't know what they're doing. But then, and then it looks like they're about to go out. Like in their run, they're losing to Ji Lai. They're about to go out, and then the
yep,
Avengers turn up,
yep,
and it's like, and then
yeah,
and then we win the end of bind, and then we win 13-0 on the next map. So they're literally about to get eliminated. They're like 10-6 down. They win like 7 in a row. Then they win 13-0. Come into the next game, win another 13-0 straight away. The worst map pick of all time, by the way. DRG picking a map that EDG just won 13-0 on, thinking, yeah, we'll have a bit of that. Get 13-0'd again. I
that
mean,
was an incredible day to watch. Honestly,
yeah. Honestly, the worst map pick of all time. Don't think it's even debatable. Uh, and then they storm through Billy in the lowers, don't lose a map, and then they win the grand final, albeit very close until the last map against Trace. I mean, it could have gone either way on all the first 3 maps, to be fair.
yeah,
But they managed to win it out, and it's just like they have this. They've got the aura diff in China for sure, but I
yeah,
think now that they've won champs, right? There is no greater prize than winning champs. A part of me does think, will they come? They'll come in with an aura diff in global events as well, right? They'll come in with a confidence and belief of like, we are the best team. We know we are the best team. We have proven that already. And I do think that against some of the teams, in this tournament, like a Team Liquid, who are maybe less experienced, or like a DRX, I mean, is there any other teams in this tournament apart from like, I mean, even like Sentinels, have a couple new players on their team, but have the core of the team has been pretty deep. But even like G2, who as a team have been together, they haven't been, deep in a ton of internationals. They had kind of the experience last year of being deep in one, and they all of individuals have, been on a team together, or, Jorga's won champs. But even there, there's probably going to be a bit of a question of like, can they win an event? right? They in their heads
Hmm.
might think, "Oh, we're good enough to win it." So when you look at like the competition they're up against, they're gonna probably feel pretty good about beating anyone, and I do think that might help them a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of like jokingly trying to figure out what's going on with them the other day, and if I remember correctly, after they won champs, there was like some interview where they scrimmed for like, I don't know, 10, 12 hours a day or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but it was like an absurd work
Hmm.
schedule. And I was kind of joking that like, well, they only scrim that much because they need like 6 warm-up scrims before they play well. And so I don't genuinely don't know. Maybe they just don't take China seriously. Maybe they don't take scrim seriously.
Yeah.
Maybe they are a team that's just very hit or miss, and when they're on, they're insane. When they're off, they're really bad. Um, it's super hard to get a read on them.
Yeah.
Uh, and so there's like a very good chance that they could lose a map, maybe even a series to Liquid. Like that's not out of the realm
No,
of
I don't think it is
possibility.
either. Because that's the thing. They've shown us that they can play awful. Like they have
Yeah.
shown that possibility. And obviously the Chinese teams have, I guess you would mostly call it an advantage, the fact that, they've had this extra time off to prepare. They've had time to like, watch the other regions essentially and just, get ideas, like if when you're playing in
Yeah.
Pacific, you're not having when you're playing, you're not having time to take a look at what, a Team Vitality are doing on Abyss. Oh, look, they're playing Triple Initiator. That's a cool idea. Let's steal that. You don't have that possibility maybe to, be always looking at the other regions. But I mean, the two Chinese teams have just been chilling, for the most
Yeah.
part, and watching all like the best teams from the other regions. And if they like an idea, they can just steal whatever they want and have extra time to work on it. So they're definitely going in with that advantage as well. Let's talk about their opponents though, Team Liquid, because obviously no one expected them to get here.
Yeah.
I mean, Mimi, I was doing a co-stream with her. She said she's gonna glue herself to a chair if Liquid made it to Bangkok. So now on broadcast,
Uh,
I think we're gonna see Mimi glue herself to a chair. I've said if Team
uh,
Liquid win, I see. I was clever. I said if Team Liquid win Masters Bangkok, then I will be oiling up. I have said this. So that they could do if they truly do the impossible. We could get
uh,
some real content out of this. But just them being there as content in and of itself. Let's talk kind of bigger picture for Liquid.
sure.
If you were on this team, let's say that you qualified, right? Let's say Global Esports qualified. Which would be a surprise. Most people wouldn't have predicted that. You're going to Bangkok. What would your kind of hopes and expectations be if it was your team going? Would you just be happy to kind of like get the experience, or would you think like there's only 8 teams here, this is a real chance to do something crazy?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing about these 8-team tournaments is it really does not take much to make top 4 or even make a grand finals. Like you
Yeah.
don't have to win very many games, and especially if you can get a good draw where like you play a team that's kind of inconsistent and
T1.
maybe maybe you don't have a ton of footage on your players, for example, because a lot of them were tier 2. Because like as far as like looking at teams, if you want to get sort of like habitual stuff on some of the players or even the teams in general, like there's not a ton of footage on Liquid. Like what they
Yeah.
were in kickoff, you can pull some things from that, but you don't really know too much, right? Nats is calling for the first time, so you don't have like years of data on how he likes to maneuver the map. Kiko is playing a totally different role, which I think, if I can just quickly talk about
Yeah,
Kiko
go
on
for it.
Smokes, I think I was flaming him quite a bit last year because he
Yeah.
was just an inexperienced duelist with really good aim, and he played like it, where he was just constantly taking really bad fights over and over because his aim is so good. Um, and he was playing a super high pressure role that demanded that he take a lot of chances. And so when you put those things together, where you've got somebody with really good aim and you put them in a high pressure role where they kind of have to play overly aggressive, usually you end up with kind of like mediocre results because they're so used to trusting their aim that when they're playing against good teams and good players that will sit you down if you take bad fights, regardless of how good your mechanics are, you get exposed. But now that he's on Smokes, he can kind of just like let his aim do all of the work, right? He just places smokes for the team. He comes in second or third onto the site, and then he just cleans up because
Yeah.
his mechanics are really, really world class. So I really like it when these players who like they look like maybe they should be a duelist, but then they're actually not really suited for the role. At least currently, maybe he could become a duelist again, but honestly, sometimes players like you take them off the duelist role where they have too much freedom and you put
Yeah.
them on a role that restricts them a little bit and they become insanely good because all of a sudden they can't overheat and they just play normally.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what happened with him a little bit.
Yeah, and I think there's an abundance of those players. You know, there are
Yeah.
quite a few of those players who have been historically duelists.
Yeah.
You know, but actually they aren't necessarily. You know, they are just better as that
Like
second
Meteor.
rifler in.
Like Meteor.
Yeah, Meteor might be a good example of it. Yeah, like when he's playing duelist back in the day, you know, he's overheating like crazy. You know,
Yeah.
he's going way too deep. You know, his team can't trade him at all. You know, he changes role and he's all of a sudden really good. And I think the difficulty I think comes, you know, if we're talking about someone like Demon One, you know, who might also fit that kind of mold. The difficulty comes when like what happens if they're also a really good with the opto as well. I think that's when it becomes kind of tricky because
Mm-hmm.
you know you kind of then maybe do want to put them on jet or whatever so that they can go on up. And so that's where I think you can run into some difficulties. But I think yeah, for the most part, I mean Kiko has been, as I say, like you have to put him in your top 10. Like honestly, with how good his numbers are, you kind of have to put him in the top 5 because like he's carrying maps. Like even
Yeah.
early on when it was Team Gluquid and they were you know not very good
He was still plus
individually,
20.
he's still you know plus 15 like across the
Yeah.
series or whatever. Like he's still crazy, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, he's just been incredibly good for the team, and that's the thing though. They're gonna need him to continue to do that against you know
Yeah.
EDG on a stage that he's never performed on before. You know, he's never had you know this bright of light on him essentially at this stage. But let's talk about it then. So where do you think Team Liquid are in terms of their actual chances in this tournament? Do you think it's possible that they you know could go on a bit of a run here? You know, can they make it to the
Sorry about that.
can they make it to the playoffs? Can they make it to the top 3? Or is that just not? I mean, they've got a I would say again, this isn't an easy draw, let's say, going up against EDG first.
Okay, so if they let's say they lose to EDG,
Yeah.
then I assume it just redraws
Yeah, it's a Swiss, so
versus
they get
another one of
yeah,
the
they'll get another
losers.
loser.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe it can't be from their own region. I don't know if they'll have like those protections in place or not. I mean, I almost feel like this is like the best possible scenario for Liquid is to play EDG.
Oh, okay.
Like,
I mean, when you think about
um,
it, in terms of the one seeds that they could have played, you know, they could have played G2, which probably would have been worse. They could have
yeah,
played, well, it was only between G2, EDG, and DRX.
DRX.
Those are the only 3
Yeah,
teams they could have played.
yeah.
Yeah, I
I
can
think
see an
it's probably
argument
the
that.
best draw,
Yeah, I can
just
see that
because
argument to
like
be honest.
I mean, Liquid like they definitely they have some like pretty interesting and some good ideas on certain maps, but then they also are relying quite a bit on just like individual playmaking. Um,
Yeah.
and I think against G2, that's a recipe to get crushed. And
Yeah.
against DRX, who's pretty structured, it's also a recipe to have some problems. So
Yeah.
why not play against a team that is also kind of a similar
Yeah.
style?
This could get very
Um,
gluey. We could get
yeah,
deep into the glue in this game if EDG want to.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so it's definitely. I don't think that Liquid are like the clear last place team at this tournament. Is
Okay.
I guess the best way to put it. Um, I think that they have a decent shot to maybe make playoffs, depending on who they play in the second round.
Hmm.
Um, but I wouldn't necessarily pick them to make playoffs.
Okay. I
That
think
makes
that's
sense.
totally fair. I think that's totally fair.
Yeah.
Let's move on to our. I think this is probably considered the best of the games, of the first matchups, which is, and maybe the most evenly matched as well. DRX versus Sentinels.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you're pretty familiar with DRX, and you might have heard of the org of Sentinels before. I'm not quite sure, but you might have heard of them. Uh, Interesting here, Thunderpick on VLR has Sentinels as slight favorites.
Hmm.
Do you agree with that? Are Sentinels slight favorites in this game versus the RX?
I think so, just purely based off of international experience. Because
Okay.
every single one of the players on Sentinels has played at least one international LAN. Some of them have won an international LAN. And I think that experience is definitely pretty big when you go to a tournament like this. That being said, DRX definitely also has the buff of not having to really change their time schedule, which is something to think about because there really isn't that much time, right? The kickoff just ended, what, a week ago or something like that.
Yep. We start in five
And
days.
yeah, it starts in 5 days. So these guys are like flying to Thailand yesterday or today or something like that and trying to adjust, which is definitely fairly tough to do. Um, so yeah, I definitely think it's gonna be close. I think my gut says Sentinels probably takes it 2-1, but I don't know. Like Sentinels definitely has some like cracks
Yes.
so far this year.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, Sen have some problems. I think on some of their maps, there is some pretty clear problems. Like, again, in the grand final against G2, it was actually looking pretty good for them. They were 2-1 up. And then I
Mhm.
know obviously G2 had the double map veto, so this can happen. But then the last two
Yeah,
maps in Fracture and Haven, I mean Haven is their permaban, so that's kind of fair enough. But they definitely look lost there. But they also look lost on Fracture, to be honest. Like that map wasn't close. It didn't look like Sen really knew what they were doing. Um, and so yeah, whilst their pearl, their split, sorry, looked really good against G2, and it was like, whoa, G2, you're getting destroyed here. Wow, Sen all of a sudden looked pretty good there. And their abyss, which has been kind of up and down, it looked like they've found something that works for them, with the Teo KO. We need a name for Teo KO, by the way, because it's I think it's quite a
Teo
it's a popular
or
idea.
TAYO.
Yes, just say it the same. Teo.
Yeah,
But yeah, Sen definitely do have some cracks. It will be. Sen are an interesting team because they have been a bit up and down. Outside of kind of the lower final against MIBR where they look like the clear better team, even
Mhm.
in their game against the 100 Thieves, they lose map 1 pretty convincingly. They could have lost to Loud, to be honest, in their second game. They then get kind of destroyed by G2, beat MIBR, and then lose the grand final, as I say. So they don't look like when Sen won Madrid, they were coming in off the back of it started a little shakier, but then by the end they'd clearly risen, and
Yeah,
they'd come in with a wave of momentum. They were on it essentially, and they kind of rode that throughout the tournament, and they very clearly at that point as well had a map in Split that it was like, we are clearly the best team in the world on this map, and if you don't ban it against us, you're 1-0 down, right? Which I think
right.
again, especially early on in the season, where I think you could point to, I'm still talking about Sen's map pool, you can point to a lot of the teams and say like, oh, you aren't that good on, like, your map pool isn't fully fleshed out. Clearly there's
Yep.
like a couple maps that you struggle on as well. You can point to pretty much
Guilty as
every team.
charged.
Yeah, you could point to pretty much every team and say that about whoever you want to. But I think that last year, whereas they did, like, if you come into a tournament where everyone's map pool is a bit shaky, but you've got one map that they have to ban, otherwise you win, that's a significant advantage early on, because either you're forcing them to ban a map that they might not want to, or you're just 1-0 up, right? And Sen don't have that kind of same kind of thing going on this year, and I think I'm interested to see what you think, because they are leaning heavy into. I mean, both these teams actually are kind of
I was
heavy
gonna.
leaning into Teo, right? DRX
This
play
is
at
what I've
every
been
map.
thinking about. I was like, has Sentinels played any teams that play Teo all the time? And has DRX played any teams that play Teo all the time? Because Teo was not quite as popular in Pacific
No,
as it was in Americas.
no.
And
DRX will have not played
a
a
lot of
lot.
the play time of Teo was from DRX.
Yeah, yeah. In Pacific, it wasn't nearly as popular as it was in Americas, and yeah, both these teams leaning heavy into Teo,
Yeah,
which I think is interesting. Again, interestingly enough, win rate wise, in terms of new agents, Teo is doing pretty okay. You know, he's doing pretty
yeah,
well. But Vice is the one. If I just give you a quick sneak peek, Vice is the agent who's kind
please
of,
do.
yeah, been doing considerably well. But also Sen play a pretty, they play quite a bit of Vice as well. But
Yeah.
that's definitely going to make this matchup kind of interesting because we're definitely going to get a significant amount of Teo. What did I mean? Talk me through your process with Teo, right? Again, let's go back to kind of the global esports part of this and the coaching side of it. Teo comes out.
Yeah.
People think it's a good agent, right? Oh, this is the first actual, pretty good agent released on release for a while. Some people think it's completely broken.
Yeah.
What was your kind of process with Teo of whether you were going to play it or not?
So coming from Dota, as many of my sentences start, this is my favorite phrase. Coming from Dota, I've learned that usually when a new hero, new agent, new content comes into the game, the devs have done a reasonably good job balancing it, but until it's been in like the general population, it's impossible to know how good it is.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, it's really, really beneficial if you spend a huge amount of time learning it as soon as possible. So
Yeah.
the agent comes out, I instantly unlock it. I play 25 games of it in a row. I tell our players, you must play this at least 15 to 20 times in the next 2 days. Very important you learn how the mechanics work. And so we did that. And so I started out thinking, yeah, it's good. It definitely has some good stuff. I don't necessarily think it is like uber broken. And I think after playing it and playing against it, I think that's probably still where I stand. I think it's very good, and I think it's very, very good against some of the older meta.
Mm.
And I think it's potentially broken on a couple of maps, but it's also very comp dependent. Um, I think that people overrate some stuff about it, but then there's other things about it that make it like crazy strong. So I really think it kind of depends on the comp that it's in.
Yeah.
Obviously, like the Breach Teo stuff, on certain maps, it's unbelievable. On other maps, it's good, and on some maps, I think there's probably better combos. I don't think it's a requirement that you must play Tejo on every map to be good at the game, unlike the chamber meta. But I do think that he is viable a good portion of the time. So I think it'll be really interesting just because like Sentinels was kind of playing in just like almost a strictly breach Tejo meta in Americas. Like at least
Yeah.
once you got to like the top 6 teams or something like that, everybody was just playing breach Tejo, right?
Yeah.
And in Pacific, DRX was able to kind of like abuse the fact that they were playing Teo and a lot of teams were not playing Teo.
Yeah.
And so it'll be interesting to see whether DRX has had enough good practice against Teo or whether just the knowledge of playing it because they play it more than anybody else will carry over to being able to counter it.
Yeah.
So I think this is a very interesting matchup just based off of that agent alone.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what the Chinese teams do as well, because obviously they
Yeah.
started earlier. They had even less time with Teo, and so there was even less Teo in China. Almost
Yeah.
no one was playing Teo in China because like they started a
Right.
couple days after he released. So it'll be interesting to see if EDG and Trace kind of pivot into playing a significant amount of Teo. We're also seeing Senna playing a significant amount of Yoru as well. I know you've
Yep.
been big on the Yoru train, and that it's finally happening. We are in. I think Yoru is definitely up there in terms of pick rates, especially in some of the regions. Again,
Yeah.
maybe not as much in Pacific, but definitely EMEA and Americas, are kind of leaning into Yoru for sure. It's interesting what you're saying about Teo, and the stats would back up what you say, by the way, that like on some maps, Teo is like, oh, this agent is clearly winning a significant amount of games. But on other maps, he's losing a significant amount of games. Like there are some maps where Teo's not doing so well. So yeah, I think you're right in your assessment of Teo that it seems, at least for now, and maybe, I mean, give it some more time. Maybe people will figure out, hey, this combo with Teo on this map is just broken. Like literally breaks the map. Like that is possible. That's still coming in the future, but at least for now, I think your assessment is correct that Teo is a good, some maps very very good agent, but isn't necessarily as of yet, broken to a point of where it's like a problem. But
and I also think he's one of those agents where like it's funny to say this just because like he's like a point and click agent, right? It's like, oh, you can throw two mollies around corners like with no lineups, but you have to be fucking fast with him because if you miss even like a split second timing to throw your utility, then it is super useless. And so,
and we've seen a lot of that with the ult. There have been a lot of ult usage with Teo that have been, what are you doing? Like, this is way too slow, way too late. This is not a Brim ult. What are you doing?
Yeah, and so he's definitely an interesting character. I think, almost in a similar vein to Yoru. This might sound like a weird comparison, but maybe they'll nerf Tejo after Bangkok. I guess they probably will. I think they'll probably nerf him, maybe even just simply like damage against opponent utility, just so he can't kill Killjoy's ultimate with one missile, which is one of the stupidest things I've ever seen. But I don't think they will nerf Yoru because I just don't think people are good enough at this agent yet. Like he's very clearly the best duelist in the game. It's not even close, and most people are still not very good with him, and so that he just won't get nerfed.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that for sure. It's just nice to see a lot of Yoru though. It's like it's finally come about, and it's like finally people have realized, I guess, or to be honest, people have just gotten better at the game to a point where they can now play Yoru, I guess. Because that's the thing, like Yoru hasn't changed in a really long time. Jet hasn't changed in a really long time. But people are now not playing Jet a lot, and are picking Yoru instead. And nothing has really changed with the agents. It's just that people have now, I think, realized and have gotten good enough to where it's like, oh yeah, we should play this agent that's just like, just pretty obviously better in quite a few ways, and also is pretty good, particularly against Vice, of course, which I think definitely is helping Yoru's pick rate.
Definitely. Yeah, the clone against the wall is like one of the only things you can do to really hard counter the agent.
Yeah, but let's just pivot back quickly to the game, DRX versus Sen, because would you agree with the statement that Sentinel's expectation is to win this event? Do you think that's where their expectation should be?
Yeah, I mean it probably should be. I wouldn't pick them to win.
No.
But I think that obviously because of their fan base, they have to expect that, and then also just because of their players, I think it's a reasonable expectation to have as an org.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be hard, but I think it's also not out of the realm of possibilities.
Yeah.
Being that they did play G2 very close, and I would say that G2 is the best team in the world currently.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And I think, well, let's pivot that to DRX as well. What should DRX is it? Like, if you were on DRX, what would your expectation be going into this, right? You won Pacific. You were clearly the best team in Pacific throughout that tournament, but you've got a pretty inexperienced team. So what would you be feeling if you were inside DRX?
Well, I mean, if you're on the team, you're obviously looking to win the event. It's in your region. You're number one in your region. If I was just like a talking head pundit, I would say that their goal should be not to choke and bomb out in 2 games. And that might sound really harsh, but like this is a team that has historically come up a little bit short internationally. The coaching staff in Mako have been a part of a lot of that, and they have a lot of very inexperienced international players that are very good, but also have not really tasted adversity yet. So I think that, if they can get this first win, like if they beat Sentinels, then the sky's the limit for them. But if they get fucking crushed by Sentinels, like 2-0, which is definitely something that could happen,
Yeah.
then, maybe they have to play a Trace or maybe an EDG that randomly loses to Liquid, and then things are very scary for them, right?
Yeah.
And so if they can get into the playoffs, I think that's a successful event for DRX. But obviously, if I'm on this team and I'm a coach, I'm like, yeah, let's win this event.
Okay, let's pivot then to the third game, which is Team Vitality versus T1. Now, again,
Yep.
let's start with T1. Who are probably the team that you're more familiar with. I'm sure you've scrimmed them and whatever. You have a general sense of how good T1 are. Let's start off with them, because their road here to making it to Bangkok was perhaps a bit more rocky than other teams' road was. Maybe it wasn't as clean as some others were, and maybe they weren't in general as good as some other teams. What are your overall thoughts on T1? Maybe, what do you think of their decision to, put in Carpe, and I assume play with Carpe in this tournament now? Like, what do you think of that? Where are you on T1?
It's so hard to say. I mean, if I had to pick a team to go out in like actual last place, they would probably be the team that I would pick.
Yeah.
I think they were definitely overrated coming into kickoff because of off-season events.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not a bad team, and they've got a lot of experience, and I think they're a better team with Carpe, as weird as that is to say. Like, I thought he played quite well, actually.
Yeah.
Subbing in last minute. I would have a hard time picking them over Vitality, but also I wouldn't be surprised if they beat Vitality.
Okay. I think people are gonna be giving you some question marks on that one. What? Explain.
And the reason I say that is just because, like, Vitality. Maybe this is a hot take. Vitality came out of the weakest region.
Ooh.
and I think that Vitality basically were able to sleepwalk through this tournament. I mean, they played really well and they had some good ideas, but I don't think that they played any teams that really challenged them. And I think that T1 has enough experience. Stax has IGL'd a lot of teams. Buzz has played a lot of international events. He's kind of inconsistent as a player, but he tends to step up on LAN, especially early on in tournaments. Meteor obviously has won an international tournament. I don't know. For me, this is like maybe the opening match that is like a sleeper upset pick. I definitely would favor Vitality, but I would not be like, if T1 were to win this, I would not be like, that doesn't make any sense.
Mm. Wow, I mean that is interesting, and like you're an American now working in Pacific. It makes sense to hate on EMEA. That's obvious to
Hey,
do.
I worked in EMEA last season, so
But yeah, if you do look at Vitality's run, they beat Carmine Core, and that was a close game. It was a great game. But Carmine Core ended up going out in 2 straight afterwards, right? So they beat Carmine Core, who went straight out. They then, I would say, they played by far their best game against Foot. Right, they really looked good in that game. That was the game that if you're gonna point to like, hey, Vitality can win this tournament, you would just look at that Foot game, because Foot didn't even play that bad necessarily, but they just got stomped by a team that was just playing amazingly well. But then you're right, they then play Heretics, who now we know, like at the time it was maybe just like, at the time it was maybe just like, oh, Heretics had an off day. That's what we were thinking, when that game first happened, like, oh, Heretics just had an off day. but they're still a good team. But then it was like, no, they are just like their confidence is just gone. You know, they're just gone. They just weren't playing very well. And then they win 3-2 in the grand final after kind of getting. And I truly do believe, by the way, in this grand final that had Liquid played a normal comp on Lotus and not something that was like so exploitable, Liquid
Yeah.
would have won. I truly do believe that. I know why they just went with, and they were, frying in the first two maps and whatever.
Yeah.
And, then we came to Lotus. But I think the fact that this comp had such obvious weaknesses to it allowed
Yeah.
Vitality to be like, okay, we've got a plan for this map. We know what
Yeah.
Liquid are going to pick. They have picked it. We know what we're doing. And it allowed them that kind of foot in. And then once they got that foot in the door, they were like, okay, now we are the better team. It gave them kind of that confidence, like, oh yeah, we know what we're doing. And they end up winning the last two maps. But that is an interesting point about Vitality. So with that said, do you think that Vitality, do you think are they like the surprise choke team in your mind? Are they the team that's going to get eliminated before playoffs that maybe people are like, whoa, what? Didn't expect that. Or do you still think that, yeah, they maybe, have a bit of an upset potential, but you're still expecting them to go to playoffs, maybe even,
Yeah.
go deep?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that they're definitely a team that could also just win this event. If their form carries over. Um, I just think that T1 is a very interesting matchup just because of all the experience that T1 has, and T1, like just having. I feel like stylistically they're a decent matchup for Vitality.
Mm.
And yeah, just going back to like the EMEA stuff. I mean, if you had to pick a team that matches up just absolutely terribly against a team with like literally 5 of the best aimers in the region, it's probably Foot, because Foot just like to fight and trade.
Yeah.
And Vitality are just like, oh, okay, well, Durka got 3 in this round, and Les got 4 in this round. Safe got 4 in this round. Unlucky, right?
Yep.
It's like sometimes if you just want to like play Counter-Strike like Foot like to do, as far as just like brawling and trading out rounds, Vitality is not the team you want to do that against.
Yeah.
And so if you're a team that has like good set executes and like defaults well and like has a decent control of like the macro of the game, I think T1 is a team like that is that. And Vitality have yet to play a team with good macro. None of the teams they've played have good macro.
Okay. Do you think that T1 are that team though? Are T1 the amazing macro team? Do you think?
Well, that's what I'm saying is they can be good. Like they are a team that has pretty solid ideas about how they want to play the game.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I would maybe put this as like a 65-35 Vitality favor, or like a 60-40, something like that.
See, because I think most people would definitely have that higher. I still personally think that Vitality will be okay. I have this feeling that Durka is gonna really carry in this tournament. I've got this feeling of like Durka.
He's been playing insanely well.
Yeah, it's gonna just go, but he's gonna go, like crazy. I can't remember. He had a tournament. I can't remember who it was, which tournament it was, but it was definitely one for Fnatic. I think before before like the 2023 team. I think it was in 2022, where he just went insane. It might have even been Champs 2021. There was definitely a tournament where Durka went absolutely like white hot, and I've got a feeling that first tournament with Vitality, he's just gonna go insane. But yeah, I think this tournament is gonna be interesting. It's interesting you kind of bring this up, like the matchups, and especially like we've been saying, right, with not everyone having like a fully fleshed out map pool. The map vetoes I think are going to be very important, because if you get onto your good maps and they're kind of maps that they haven't fully figured out yet, that's certainly going to be a big advantage, I think. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of interesting. How is map vetoing, by the way? Let me just quickly ask you that. How is it? You doing a lot of prep for map vetoes? What's it like?
I mean, I just provide some information, and I haven't actually been at a veto because it's been the head coach and the IGL that go do it.
That's sad.
So
I think you should just go alone. You should just turn up on your own. Do it.
Yeah,
do it without them being there. Yeah.
Nah, it's all right. I mean, I don't need that hanging over my head. Oh, we picked the wrong map. No.
Okay.
I just want to be prepared with 7 good maps, and then don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. Good luck with that. I'm sure, I'm sure every team is thinking the same thing, and almost none of them do. I think there's been maybe, let me think, maybe one team in the entire history of Valorant last year with Gen G that maybe had like 7 actually decent playable maps, and I think other than that, I can't think of any other
Well,
team.
there's about to be 2. There's about to be 2.
Well, we'll see, won't we? But let's move on then to the final game. In fact, just before we do, tell me that. So your vitality, your vitality stocks are you've been a little up and down in that, you've said, oh, maybe they'll be good, maybe they'll be shit. Tell me then, where are vitality finishing in this tournament? Give me a place.
Mm-hmm.
You
I
can
think
ask
they'll
one of your
finish top.
players if you want as well behind you.
Poppy, come to the podcast. Where will vitality finish? Top 4? Top 2? Top 1? You think they're going to win the tournament? Les is the
Wow.
best Phantom player now that he's converted. So
Hmm.
Vitality will win, according to Poppy.
Well, there you go. So more hope on the GE team than than Elevate has for vitality. Go on, you didn't give me
Yeah,
your answer though. Where are they finishing?
top 4.
Top 4. Okay.
Yeah.
Top 4. That seems reasonable, I think. I think most people wouldn't necessarily disagree too much, but we'll get
I guess
into
I
it.
should say third, fourth, because top 4 could be anywhere from 4th to 1st. So I'll give you a little bit more
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean,
specific.
you could go more specific than that because 3rd and 4th are separate in this tournament.
Oh, are they? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just say third, fourth, and feign ignorance of the format.
Okay. Let's move on then to the final game, which is G2 versus Trace. Now, I feel bad for Trace because I truly believe had they got any of the other top seeds, so had they got DRX or Vitality, which they could have got, I would have given them a very good chance of beating those two teams. I would have said you've got a great chance. I'm just not quite sure. The only thing I will say is Trace's chance to win this game is probably that G2 come in cold, right? Like you say with the time zone thing,
Yep.
like it's first game, you come in a little cold, and that's Trace's kind of, path to victory, I suppose. And Trace did, surprise and upset teams last year in champs, right? They beat both Vitality and Lev. Trace have improved, I would say, actually fairly significantly from champs. I think then they were basically good on 2 maps and happened to get those 2 maps. Speaking of the worst map vetoes of all time, that Lev map veto, one of the worst of all time. Letting Trace pick one of the 2 maps that they were good on and picking the other one. Not great by Lev there. But who actually, your boss was on that Lev team. You might need to ask him about that and what the hell they were thinking, to be honest, because that is one of the biggest map veto throws I've ever seen. That's what you should do. You should say, I've seen what you can do on map vetoes. I'm taking over. I'm taking the reins. Anyway, let's talk about G2 Trace. Go on, you gave a percentage for one of the other games. What percentage would you give Trace in this one? How are you feeling?
40%.
40. So I mean, that's I would say more belief than most people would have. Explain why 40%.
The odds are obscene on this, by the way. The betting odds are obscene. I'm wondering because all of the Chinese teams are played in another tournament, and the 2 teams that qualified for Bangkok either sent their academy team or their coaches to play. And I'm wondering if these betting odds are taking into account this, because there is no shot that these odds should be this steep for Trace. So Trace are a good team. I would say just based off of playing them in scrims in the off season, coming into kickoff, I thought they were the best Chinese team. They almost proved that they were, and they have just always been a very solid team. They didn't really change too much from last year, so they've got lots of experience. They have good ideas on a lot of the maps. They have good players at every position. If they hadn't fined Heybei an entire month's salary, I would probably have even more faith in
I
them.
mean,
But
that is
he,
crazy, is it not?
he's got to be a little emo right now, and and maybe that's not a good thing going into the tournament.
Is that not the craziest thing you've ever heard of, though?
Yeah, it's pretty bananas.
So for those of you who don't know, and maybe I don't even fully have the story, he was playing on an account with his girlfriend, right? And essentially, like, they were playing together, and obviously he's a pro player and she's a whatever, I don't even know. But obviously he's
With
then
gold or something.
stomping in the games.
Yeah.
Which
and
I
there
think,
happens to be a streamer in the game, and apparently they start flaming each other, and then he gets
and he got fined
like,
a
reported by
month's
this
salary. A month.
Yeah. Yeah.
A month.
Yeah.
I mean, what would happen if GE Elevated got fined a month's salary?
I'd probably take a ticket to Bali and say I'll come back to work in a month. Goodbye.
Yeah, well, they better hope that Heybei doesn't do that, because otherwise they're in trouble. That is insane, isn't it, though?
Yeah.
I
Right
mean,
before an event, too.
right
That's
before
tough.
an event. I mean, just unbelievable. I literally could not believe that the punishment is that harsh. Like, most people
Yeah.
would be like, yeah, he's playing with his girlfriend. Who cares?
Yeah.
Like, who cares? What does it matter? I mean, it is truly unbelievable.
I really don't know what's going on with that. But, I mean, the thing is, like you said, G2 has started a little bit slow at some international tournaments. They have a lot of expectation coming into this. And stylistically, Trace is like probably the closest to G2 in terms of how they play the game. So I think it's it's one of those things where it's like I feel like this is either going to be G2 kind of just outskilling Trace, or it's going to be just a grind, and it could go either way depending on which team is like showing up at their maximum potential in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for me. Like, because to be fair to G2, like, I think their structure is very good. They obviously have a ton of chemistry on the team. I don't know if you've watched any of their voice comms, but they seem to just have like perfect team chemistry right now. So that'll probably be enough to get them over the hump and get them into the playoffs, maybe even a deep run to the finals here. But Leaf and Trent have been hitting unbelievable shots for the last like 5 games, or last 4 games, whatever. And so, sometimes you don't one tap everybody on your screen, and if you lose a couple of those crucial gunfights, sometimes things start to crumble. So that's kind of where I'll leave that. Is I would definitely pick G2 in this matchup, but it's not out of the realm of possibility for all of the tier 1 or all of the number 1 seeds to lose in this tournament.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I think people, as you say, like, these odds that we're seeing for Trace, like, that just tells me, like, oh, you haven't, like, whoever's saying these odds, like, you just haven't watched Trace. Like, you just haven't watched them play, because they are a good team with very good players. And my worry, the worry when you're playing G2, and this is the thing, when we were talking about G2 last year, it was like, yeah, they're good. They have good structure. They play well as a team. That's the team that they were. But they didn't, like, Trent and Leaf weren't popping off like this. They didn't have that individual form on top of all of that. It's like they had the team cohesion, but they didn't have the, wow, this individual is going crazy. And the thing is, it's not just, if those two do kind of, fall off a bit or whatever, and aren't as hot, well, Jorgmo has been pretty cold so far. And the whole reason of bringing Jorgmo in is that he can be that guy, that can just go crazy. And he hasn't done so far, but that, we've seen enough of Jorgmo to know that he can and he will. And in fact, you would often say that in the bigger moments, that is when he does it, right? You're thinking like the Champs Grand Final and he's going crazy, right? So, maybe he will just wake up as well. So that, I think, is the worry for anyone who's playing against G2, is that even apart from maybe that split map against Sentinels, they will always show you something that you're like, wow, that's a really cool idea. Oh wow, that they've really thought about that, and no one's ever, we've never seen that kind of thing before. And they'll always show you those kind of things, and it's really interesting. Or like when it's like a second round and they've taken some damage and they throw the gun over to someone else and jump off the map to get an ult orb, like things like that.
Yeah.
Like that are just like no one's ever thought about that before. They're so good they can afford to spend time talking about, hey guys,
Like
I've got this. I've been thinking about min-maxing orbs on Abyss, like because we've already got all the fundamentals down and we've got all of that kind of the team comms and trading and stuff like that. That's already so good, and I do think that you're right that the comms, what G2 have, and I've noticed more with G2 than I think any other team by a fair amount, is when like it's a chaotic, messy situation. Maybe it's like, and it gets traded down to like a 2v1, and then like instantly one guy knows to like, jump peek with a classic, and the other guy knows to swing. Like straight, they do it straight away, right? As if they know which one of them is gonna do it. They know how to do it, execute it perfectly as well. And it's just like you don't always see that from like particularly early season teams. I think, once we get towards champs, a lot of teams will be doing that. Hopefully, almost every team that's going to champs will be at that level, doing that kind of thing. But at least for right now, like you still see quite a lot of, oh, we lost a 1v2 because, we didn't quite know
the timing was bad. Somebody walk peaked.
Yeah. We didn't know where each other were. We didn't know like what to do in that situation, like that kind of thing. G2 rarely do that, right? They rarely kind of lose those situations because it is like, I mean, and of course this comes with playing, 3 of them have been playing together for what, 4 years, 4.5 years.
Yeah.
Like they know what each other's thinking.
If you watch their voice comms videos, it's very obvious why they're so coordinated, because they're really coordinated in how they talk about the game while they're playing it.
Yeah. So I do think, and I'm sure you'll agree, that like anything other than not winning this tournament is a failure for G2. You would agree with that, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, honestly, I think it's, if they make grand finals and they lose a banger, it's like,
yeah, they'll still probably feel okay about that. Obviously, they won't feel great about losing, but that like overall they'll think like, okay, that was not too bad.
Yeah, but they should be making top 2, like 100%.
Yeah. If they don't make the grand final though, yeah, it would be like, it would be almost like a betrayal of what we've seen so far, because I think just across the board, the games that they've played so far, they've clearly been, just to the eye test, the best team. So yeah, not finishing at least in the top 2. You get to the top 2, it's your first grand final for everyone but Jorgamo. They're a bit nervous. They lose to, the worst case scenario would be getting EDG, I think, in the grand final. That would be G2's worst case of a team that think like if EDG have got to the grand final, they know they're going to win.
Yeah, it's a problem if EDG have gotten to the grand final, I think, for any team.
Yes, 100%. Sure. That would be their worst case. What G2 probably want, I mean, what they probably want is like Liquid making the grand final. That would be their ideal.
Yeah, I think they're one of those teams, like you said, where they've shown the level of winning a tournament already.
Yeah.
Like, most of these other teams have not. Like, I think Vitality have maybe shown
they did in the foot game.
Could win a tournament.
Yeah, they had one game of it.
Sentinels have not shown that they could win a tournament, and obviously that might sound stupid because like they didn't, but like at no point during kickoff did they show a level where I'm like they could win a tournament. But I know that this team could show that level, right? So there's like a hidden ceiling that they have.
Yeah.
Same thing for a team like T1. Same thing for a team like EDG. Actually, I mean, I guess EDG on Haven have shown like they could probably win a tournament.
Winning 32 rounds in a row without losing a round, I would say that's kind of that's a winning mentality right there.
Yeah. Some of these teams haven't shown their ceiling. Some of them haven't shown their floors, and so it's a little bit hard to figure that out. But definitely G2 have shown like a ceiling that is capable of winning a tournament.
100%. And so let's now quickly pivot then. We've kind of talked about some of the teams and where we think that they might place. Let's just quickly go through the games just once more and say like who you think. Let's do a little quick pick 'em here. So EDG versus Liquid.
I'm gonna pick EDG.
I too am gonna pick EDG. DRX versus Sentinels.
I think I'm gonna pick Sentinels here.
I'll go DRX. Let's have a bit of variety. I'll go DRX. Team Vitality versus T1. Now you say you were talking.
I'm gonna pick Vitality.
Oh, what a boring Barry. I'll obviously go Vitality because I don't think T1 are that good. G2 versus Trace. Do it.
Nah, you gotta go G2.
Oh my god, what a boring Barry. I too will go G2, but I think Trace will beat whoever they get next. No matter who it is, Trace will win. And I say that, and they could get EDG, and that would definitely be the worst case for Trace getting EDG.
That would
in that
be
game.
very sad for them.
Yeah, but anyone else, I feel good about.
Truly, no matter how good you are in China, until a team like consistently starts beating EDG domestically,
I honestly think it's more likely that someone wins an international than someone beating EDG in a grand final in China. I feel like that is actually more possible.
They're just so aura diffed in their region. It's crazy.
Yeah. They're just inevitable. I mean, even when Trace are dominating them 13-4, 13-4, and then they're about to get eliminated, they still end up winning the tournament because, of course, they do.
Yeah.
Okay, and with that said, so that's the initial picks, and obviously we don't know what the second games would be because it's a Swiss, and so it's kind of drawn after the fact. I don't think there is region lock after this. I think it's just a draw, going off what I remember from Masters Madrid, but I might be wrong about that. But let's get a top three then. Let's get an Elevated Speaks top three Masters Bangkok. I say top three because I wanted you to reveal where Vitality are out third and fourth.
Okay. I'll say G2, EDG, Sentinels.
As your 1, 2, and 3. So that's G2 winning. Not Sentinels winning. Yeah. So G2 EDG final with Sentinels coming in third place. And we know from what you said before, Vitality finishing in fourth place. I think, again, you're being a bit of a boring Barry there. I think that's a pretty common sentiment. I'll say in third, I'm going to put I'm going to put DRX in third. I'm going to say DRX, do your Pacific region at least some pride. At least a little bit of pride for Pacific. I'll say, man, do I believe in a G2 choke? No. G2 are too good to... They're just too good. I'm gonna say G2 second, EDG first. I'm gonna go in on we get the good EDG. Because I think
watch them go out in 2 games.
Honestly, they could, but that's the thing. I think that you've made the mistake of, like, if EDG are in the final, I think they win. Especially against G2.
Yeah.
But if EDG either don't finish in the top 4 or they win. That's my take. That's the hot take. EDG either don't make playoffs or they win the whole thing.
That's fair.
And I mean that's Masters Bangkok. I think we've sorted it. I don't think there's too much else to say about Masters Bangkok, to be honest. I think we've absolutely knocked it out of the park. I mean, is that Pappy behind you right there? I will be watching every game.
Yeah, that is. No
one else there to ask who they think is going to win? I kind of wanted the GE Pick'ems, to be honest. But I guess...
some of them are in a ranked game. Hold on. Yudo-tan. Who's winning Bangkok? I don't know if you heard that, but as a Korean, he's contractually obligated by society to root for T1. So...
Okay, you might want to tell him that's definitely not going to happen. They do not have Faker on their Valorant team. You might just want to make him aware of that.
Well, unlucky for Korea.
Yeah, unlucky for Korea. And yeah, I don't think there's too much else to say unless you want to, promote the GE bundle or something like that. Do you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously buy the GE bundle. It's the best bundle in the game. It represents so much. There's so many red, white, and blue flags out there, so there's a little something for everybody. in the global esports community.
What? In fact, let's just quickly get onto that. What do you think of the bundles this year? I think they're a big letdown, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely. I think. Okay, so they went with the standardization of the cards,
Yeah.
which to me was the biggest letdown.
Yes.
I think a lot of the bundles actually looked better this year because teams chose better colors.
Yes.
Like if you just had a one-to-one comparison last year's bundle to this
Yeah.
year's bundle, I think a lot of the teams did better. A few did worse. They also had like a wider variety of color palette available to them, apparently, I guess. I don't really know. But I think the biggest thing that people will miss and that will cause the sales to be significantly lower than last year, even
Yep.
more so than just it being another classic, is the cards,
Yeah. 100%.
which sucks because the cards is like that's where you can actually like get new fans.
Yeah.
like
Like you can get some
if you
personality
have
into it. Yeah.
if you have a sick bundle with like good colors on the classic and a really cool card like Lev,
Yeah. I
you
mean, when
know,
Leo
then
said that Lev outsold Sen, like that's all you need to know. The fact that Lev, a South American org, and he revealed
yeah,
that they sold more than Sen, by far the most popular org, who was like their whole like joke was just shilling the bundle constantly
yeah,
throughout the entire year, and yet Lev sold more because their bundle looked cool.
yep,
Like that's all you need to know. And
yeah.
but now we've taken away a massive part of the bundles looking cool.
There's only two teams that I've ever seen outside of Pacific teams classics in Pacific ranked,
Mm.
and that's Sentinels and Lev.
Yeah.
And I've probably seen about an equal amount of both of them over here.
Yeah, exactly. Which is just it's crazy to think about, and considering as well that like the bundles came out, Sen then won Madrid, like it couldn't have worked out literally any better for Sen, and Lev still outsold them.
They
It's
got
crazy.
highlighted. They got highlighted in the store.
Yeah, as the bundles were like the new cool thing to talk about. Like, yeah, I will tell you right now, the cards will be back because I think all of the orgs are going to say we didn't
You
sell
screwed us.
nearly as
Yeah.
much. Yeah, we didn't sell nearly as
Yeah.
much. So what's the point? Like, I understand that it's hard. Like, the orgs would probably be willing to say, like, we understand it's hard for you to make these things, but we'll work, like, extra super hard to make sure it can work. Because that's how we're going to get a significant amount of money. Like, why would we not?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be great if they did stuff like sprays or like interesting buddies, but these are all things that are like maybe a little bit harder to implement. But the card, it's like it just sits there, right? And it's just it doesn't interact with the game at all. So it can't be that difficult, right?
Yeah.
And as Lev proved, and something it's like death, taxes, and the power of dragons in anime. Those are like the four things that you can believe in life.
Yeah. I mean, they will be back though. I don't see a way that like surely the almost every org will be talking to Riot saying, "Look, bro, we need more. we need more sales, and the cards are clearly a big reason." And maybe even petition to be like, "We need to do a different gun." Like people will buy a skin of a different gun. Like it's cool you thinking that the classic is going to be like a team jersey, it's there every round or kind of whatever. You know what else is there every round? A knife.
Yeah.
Like who wouldn't buy a GE knife?
Yeah.
Not
many people would say no to that.
Exactly. Exactly. So
especially if it had the red, white, and blue colors to represent America.
Yeah. So Riot, I'm sure, will change their mind in time. I'm gonna say hopefully you won't be on an episode of Cosmic Divide Again Elevated until maybe after Champs, because that means you are going deep in tournaments. You don't have any time. You're preparing. You're too busy to be on Cosmic Divide. That's what I'm hoping for. That maybe you'll be on after Champs and you can talk about your Champs win. God, imagine if GE won champs. Imagine if GE win champs, you have to come on. You have to be on Cosmic Divide.
Well, I mean, at that point, I might have an appearance fee, so we'll see. No. I will always make time for you, Mr. Valorant. So yeah, we'll speak again soon. But yeah, I agree. Hopefully, it will be after a long, deep run in every single event that we play
Yes,
this year.
I really hope so. But yeah, thank you so much for a very busy schedule you've got. And I will be rooting for GE, of course. The TMV chat will be full of, little GE flags, I'm sure. And
Oh,
GE
so you
fighting.
will watch our games this
Well,
time,
this
huh?
is the problem, right? You unfortunately kept getting scheduled as the early game. The early game in Korea doesn't have daylight savings time, which also destroyed me because the games are starting an hour earlier than they will later in the season when our clocks go forward, you'll be starting at a better time for me. Uh, and you can't that's the thing. Even if I just watch the
Me
first Americas
TV.
game and it
So
goes 3
sensitive,
maps, it's
Mr.
like then
Valorant.
I'm only by the time I'm going to sleep, it's like it's already 1:30, so it's like, oh, I might as well just stay up and watch the second game at that point. And then it's like, well, I'm not making your game, am I? And I'm sorry, but who did you play? You want me to watch Team Secret? It's more about the teams you're playing. If you played Paper Rex, I would have watched it. I would have happily watched you destroy Paper Rex. Happily.
You're right. It is my fault that you didn't watch our games. My bad.
Yeah, I'm glad. It's the Korean government's fault for getting rid of daylight savings time. That's what I'm going with. But yes, thank you for making the time, Mr. Speaks. And that concludes. I still don't know what episode this was. You can tell that unlike Elevated, who would prepare that kind of thing. But whatever episode this is, it's over. Goodbye. Thank you, Mr. Elevated.
Goodbye.